My name is Antoine. I'd like to welcome you to our 12 o'clock Curator's Corner. I am certainly not a curator, I am the gardener of the fort. You can tell by the color of my knees and of my pants. Our curator is out and about gallivanting somewhere. Today's talk is about fur trade. And Fort Langley, of course, is a Hudson's Bay Company fur trading post established here on the shores of the Fraser River in 1827. The Hudson's Bay dates back to much further back than 1827. The Hudson's Bay Company is created in 1670 for the sole purpose of coming to North America to get beaver furs. This is a beaver fur, and this is a rather small beaver. Beavers, of course, are the largest rodent in North America, closely related to the Langley mouse or the Vancouver rat. The beaver is what the Hudson's Bay Company is looking for. Well, why are they looking for beavers? Any ideas? Yes?
To trade them for other supplies and sell them in France and...
Yeah, very close. So they will trade with the local indigenous people with items that they bring from Europe, like blankets like this ones, and pots and pans and axes and knives and muskets and buttons and all kinds of metal goods. And they'll trade with indigenous people for furs like the beaver fur. And like you said, they're going to take these furs and they're going to ship them back to Europe, to England. And in England, they will be sold. But who will buy these?
Women.
Clothing company?
Women? Close.
Rich people.
Rich people, absolutely. But what is made with these? I'll give you a hint. And if you look at that print on the wall of a cricket match in England, what do we see a lot of in that picture?
Top hats. Clothes.
Top hats.
Top hats. Top hats is what drives the fur trade. Top hats are so popular in Europe that they've run out of beavers, and beaver fur makes the best top hats. And so popular that they've run out of beavers. So the Hudson's Bay Company is created to come to North America to get more beaver furs so that more people can wear top hats. And who is it mainly that wears top hats? Men. So top hats and the fur trade are actually driven by men's fashion. And if you look at that print of a cricket match, you'll see that every man in the crowd is wearing a beaver top hat. Even the players are wearing beaver top hats. And in the far stands, more beaver top hats. You can make a top hat out of any fur. Very cheap top hats would be made out of rabbit fur. But top hats in those days are kind of like watches today. I can buy a watch at Superstore for $12, and it will last me about 6 weeks, and I know by experience. Or, and I don't know by experience, I could buy a Rolex for $10,000 that will last my lifetime, and whoever I give it to's lifetime when I die. Beaver top hats are the same as the Rolexes of watches. These are hats that will last a lifetime, and when you give it away to somebody on your deathbed, it will most likely last their lifetimes as well. Now, why does beaver fur make such good top hats? Their furs look pretty much the same as a rabbit fur or any other kind of fur. But if you look closely at a beaver fur, it has two types of hair. It has these prickly guard hair on top, and underneath some very fine small hair that we call beaver wool. And these guard hairs are useless for top hats. So hat makers will buy the furs from the Hudson's Bay Company, and the Hudson's Bay Company makes a fortune selling these furs to hat makers. And then they'll hire children your age. And these children will be hired to pluck the guard hair off the skin. It's called child labor. I'm personally all in favor of it because it keeps children out of trouble, but not everybody agrees with me.
They already signed as well. They signed the first page, right?
Awesome, we'll put them to work.
So I'll just leave them here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Child labor ready.
So the guard hair are plucked off, and hat makers will sell these prickly hair to brush makers that will make paint brushes and shaving brushes for men. Then the very fine hair underneath are shaved off the skin. The skin itself, the leather, will be sold to shoemakers. These very fine hair underneath will be mixed in great big cauldrons by the hat makers with steam and some nasty chemicals like arsenic and lead and mercury.
Oh my goodness.
I know. And of course, in those days, protective gear is pretty much non-existent. So hat makers breathe in these fumes all day as they're making hats, and these fumes will attack their nervous systems. Hat makers usually die mad. And if you've read Alice in Wonderland with the Mad Hatter, that was a common risk of being a hat maker. So hat makers will use the very fine hair, mixed it with steam and mercury and arsenic and lead, and then shape it on a dry form into the shape that they like. And they'll shape it into different types of top hats. And when that felt, because that material is called felt, dries, it hardens. And this is what the final product would have looked like. Now, of course, if you have a hat that is worth as much as a Rolex, you want to protect it. So beaver hats came with a traveling case like this one. This specific case says,
Montreal.
thank you, I was looking for that, Montreal on it. So I imagine it traveled to Montreal and got a sticker. No, it must have been made in Montreal. And according to our records in the archives department, which is about 6 stories underground in a very dark cave where our curator sometimes hides, we have information on this case. And this case was purchased by Parks Canada in 1965 for the sum of $8. I know, they paid the high price. The government always gets anyway. $8 for this case. It was made in Montreal. According to the research on it, it would have been made in 1895. So let's have a look at what's inside.
Oh, sorry. That was me.
Children are falling over in excitement.
It's heavy.
Very nice case, made out of leather, lined with a nice, soft, beautiful colored material. It's not leather, it's...
Velvet.
Thank you. And this is the top hat. And this is the case. So this hat fits snugly in that case. You could travel across North America like George Simpson did in 1821 and carry your top hat with you in your birch bark canoe in its traveling case. This hat is made of beaver fur or beaver felt. If you look closely, you can see the little hair on the top. These hats will hold their shapes in the rain, in the wind, in the sleet. They are amazing. Now, since the hat makers use all these nasty chemicals to make the felt, the material, where do you think that those chemicals go, other than in the lungs of the hat makers?
The one that wears
Straight to
them.
the scalp.
Yeah, it would be still in there. So you don't want this material to be in touch with your forehead. Some people like me have small foreheads, so it's not too dangerous. But if it touches your forehead and if you're sweating, your pores open up and these nasty chemicals would make their way into your head. So to protect you, the hats are lined. And there will always be a leather lining on the inside band and then more lining so that none of your head actually touches the actual material. So this is what these top hats would have looked like. And beaver fur, if we are careful with it, please, we're not going to pluck at it. We ask people if they touch the fur to touch it with the back of their hands because the front of our hands have oils on them that could harm the fur. So we'll touch it with just the back of our hand. So these beaver furs that the Hudson's Bay Company comes all the way to North America from London, England to get is for men's fashion. Now, by the time Fort Langley is built in 1827, the price of fur is starting to go down. Silk coming from China will replace these top hats with fancy silk hats that you have in many shapes and many colors. But beaver hats will still be worn by a lot of military soldiers and Marines. The tricorn, among others, is a beaver hat. Almost all the black hats that you see in Europe in the 16, 17, early 1800s would have been made of beaver fur. Correct. And you trap beavers in winter. That's when they have their thickest coat.
Okay.
And the best furs come from higher up north. So when the Hudson's Bay Company opens up Fort Langley in 1827, they're looking for beaver furs. But their main goal is to stop American fur traders from coming along the coast of the Pacific and stopping at the mouth of the Fraser River every 6 months to trade with indigenous people. The Hudson's Bay Company doesn't like competition. So they built Fort Langley here on the Fraser River, 30 kilometers up from the Pacific Ocean. And all the furs that indigenous people are taking down to the Americans will pass right in front of us first. We'll get first crack at them. And the Hudson's Bay Company, for the first 2 years of Fort Langley, loses a pile of money purposely to give better prices to indigenous people so the furs don't make it to the Americans. And it worked so well that after 2 years of getting no furs, Americans stopped coming at the mouth of the Fraser River, and the Hudson's Bay Company once again had the monopoly that they liked to have. Welcome. You're welcome. If anybody wants to have a look at the beaver hat, you're welcome to. If you want to touch it, I ask that you touch it from underneath the bands, and you can certainly look at it and turn it around. And the beaver fur.